Welcome to one of the craziest weeks of 2025. We have so many astrology transits happening in a very short amount of time, and they're all pretty nuts. So let me go ahead and list them for you. We start the week with Mars trining Neptune, which is fine. That's not a big deal. But then Mars goes into Sagittarius and immediately goes opposite Uranus, which is a lot of chaos, a lot of disruption. Then we're going to be having the full moon in Taurus immediately after Venus is going to move into Scorpio. We'll have Mars make a sextile to Pluto, and then Uranus comes back into Taurus. Uranus has been in Gemini since about, I think it was like maybe June or July. Uranus comes back into Taurus. Venus will square Pluto, and we end the week with Mercury stationing retrograde. There is so much crazy astrology this week. This is quite an intense little week, so let's just go ahead and get started talking about it. Welcome back to the Astrology Report, this time for November 3rd through November 9th of 2025. My name is Cam White, if you don't know me already, and my job is to tell you what is going on in the astrology and letting you know how to use it to your advantage. If you're interested in things like that, make sure you like, subscribe, comment below. I'm going to tell you what to comment a little bit later on in the video. If you guys know, you know. And before we get started talking about Monday, I'm really excited to share with you guys the 4-week live relationship course that I am launching. I've seen over 2,000 clients, and I've literally predicted marriages, people meeting people. I've predicted, I think, like 20 pregnancies at this point. And a lot of you guys use astrology for relationships, but there's so much more that you're missing. And when you're just looking at your 7th house or your Venus placement, you're really scratching the surface. And in this 4-week live course, I want to teach you everything that I know, especially when it comes to if you're single, when you're going to meet someone, how to be ready for that person. If you're already in a relationship, how astrology can enhance your relationship and how to be a better partner for your spouse or for your boyfriend or for your girlfriend. As well, we're going to dive deep into composite charts, synastry charts, just so you guys know exactly how to read them and how to use them. This is a 4-week live course where every single session you're going to be joining me live. We'll be able to answer all of your questions. And you're going to be able to walk away with this with a completely new take on relationships. And especially if you're single, you're going to be able to map out dates when you're more than likely to meet someone or a relationship's about to begin. As well, you're going to be able to know when are some of the bad times in relationships and how to handle them and how to address them. And even if you're in a relationship too, this is really going to be able to enhance your understanding of your partner and yourself and how you guys can work together and give yourselves more space, give yourselves more love. And when there's times of like hostility, being able to like manage it. This is everything that I've learned with this. This is everything that I've learned with relationships and astrology. And out of all of the clients that I've seen, it's like 80% of the time, a lot of clients actually want more understanding of relationships. And so I've done my due diligence over the years. And as I've worked with clients repeatedly and they've come back to me year after year, they always let me know, you were right about me meeting this relationship. You were right about me ending this relationship. You were right about the way that I went about this relationship and how I can fix it. In fact, I just had a client last week where we were able to look at her like 7th house and what was going on with her 7th ruler in the 8th. And it just really brought about the issue in the relationship. And I was able to like kind of coach her on like, hey, well, if this is how you're operating with these placements and everything, like what if we could just like tweak it to look like this to where you're not so, frustrated, not so conflict oriented. And there was a really big breakthrough that she had with it. And so I'm really excited to teach this course because I want you guys to be able to be your own astrologers and be able to understand relationships for yourself to an extreme level. Like I said, we'll go over composite charts, synastry charts, as well as even things like zodiacal releasing, annual perfections, transits, all of that stuff, to where you get the full scope of what everything could possibly look like and mean in relationships. This is a 4-week live course, and it's only available from now until about next week, November 11th. So if you want to sign up for it, this is going to be the time to do it. I'm really excited to see you guys there. I've been working a lot on this, and this has been something that's been in my head for like literally years at this point. Plus, I'm a Libra moon. I know a lot about relationships. So we start Monday off with Mars trining Neptune, Mars in Scorpio trining Neptune in Pisces, and the moon in Aries making a square to Jupiter. Look, this is Mars at 29 degrees Scorpio. Some people kind of talk about the anaretic degree stuff. I'm not really always that into that. The only time I do care about it is like 29 degrees Scorpio because there's something a little bit extreme going on there. Because the difference from Scorpio into Sag is Scorpio is like going as deep down and dark as possible. And if you think of like a rubber band, it's like pulling that rubber band all the way down. And then Sagittarius is like letting it go. Mars in Scorpio, if Mars is about fights and conflicts and energy and drive, it's in its domicile in Scorpio. So there's a lot of strength here. And Mars is trining Neptune, the planet of idealization, romanticizing, and even things like delusion. But Mars is in the superior position here. And if you've been part of the team that's been learning about the aspects, we know that Mars in the superior position, making this trine to Neptune, is going to be a lot more about what you're doing and your energy and your drive is enhancing your vision. This is a key difference with some of these superior and inferior aspects. Some of the things I wrote down was like fantasy for fuel, or even actions are fueling your own delusions. Now, I want to be careful about what I say about delusions because there are times where some of you are like in spiritual psychosis and you need a little bit of a reality check. But also, too, like Mars in Scorpio is very focused. Mars in Scorpio is very driven. And that drive and that tenacity can really help fuel your vision. I think delusion is also important, too, because Mercury is in Sagittarius now. And Mercury is about logic, rationale. We know that it's in detriment in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter. And of course, Jupiter is about hope and faith. And so while Mercury is in Sagittarius, you have to really suspend a lot of your ideas of rationality, and you have to kind of let yourself be a little bit more irrational. And so Mars being so driven, trining Neptune, I just think this is a really good day to be like, you know what, I'm going to put my energy into this. And as I do this, I'm going to visualize, I'm going to fantasize. This is me doing what I need to do in order to create the vision that I want for my life. And that's added on top to the moon in Aries making a square to Jupiter in Cancer. The moon is waxing, it is building up for that full moon. So it's very hot and bothered. And the moon, being about our emotions, is in the sign of Mars. It is an action and energy oriented sign. So emotionally, we're really invested in what we're doing, into our actions. We're doing a lot of things on this day. And it is in the superior square to Jupiter. And so the way that I look at this is there's a lot of reward for emotional effort going on Monday. So this is a very crazy week, but it starts off with a lot of intense effort. And I think there's a lot of reward if you just like put your all into it and kind of just leave it out all on the field on Monday. And that brings us to Tuesday. And late night, Monday night, going into Tuesday morning, the moon will make that square to Jupiter and then immediately go opposite Venus and Libra. Then later on in the day, Mars is going to enter Sagittarius, and then it's going to immediately go opposite Uranus. And then the moon later on is going to enter Taurus and make a square to Pluto. The thing that I was looking for, or the thing that I was thinking about with the moon in Aries going opposite Venus and Libra is action versus reception. I can't think of the like passive versus active is the dynamic that I'm trying to think of. You know, there's the pushing out and then there's the receiving. That's how I think of the moon in Aries opposite Venus and Libra. And the way I think about it is I think on Tuesday morning, especially if you're more on the East Coast or in Europe and you're waking up, there's this level of, okay, I'm putting all this emotional intensity into something. Am I able to receive it in equal force? I think it's really interesting how sometimes we're super locked up in our emotions or just not open to receiving things. And so we might push a little bit harder and harder. Yet as we push harder, we're not always open to receiving the rewards of what we're doing. And I think that dynamic just kind of comes out on Tuesday morning. But that's really early in the morning and it kind of comes and goes. And the big highlight is Mars going into Sagittarius and immediately going opposite Uranus. Mars in Sagittarius is exciting. I do think besides Venus going into Scorpio, I think, Venus goes into Scorpio later this week. That's a little bit of a downer, but I've got a lot of tips and tricks to kind of combat any sort of bad things about Venus and Scorpio as we talk. But Mars going into Sagittarius, I think, is when we start to see like a little bit more fun and excitement. December has some really fun astrology, and that really continues on into January of 2026. But Mars is action, energy. It's in the sign of Sagittarius. This is about going far, going the distance. And Mars is in the sign of Jupiter. Jupiter's house is about believing. Jupiter's house is about faith. It's about hope. And something I think a lot about is Mars in Sagittarius is just really fueled by faith. And there's this sort of blast off and like adventurous attitude that we have to Tuesday. And the thing though, is as Mars goes into Sagittarius and we're like, yes, I'm free, I'm liberated, I want to go. It immediately goes opposite Uranus. This is going to be a shakeup. I would say for a group of you, expect whether it's fights or conflicts, whether it's some sort of thing that you do to kind of create some more instability. Maybe people are arguing more with you. Maybe, your car breaks down. I don't want you to stress or worry about it. I want you to anticipate there being a little bit of ruffled feathers because this isn't necessarily like a bad situation. It can be really easy to react to it in a negative way though. Just like if you're already having a bad day and something really minor happens and it just sets you off, that energy is like super available on Tuesday. And I don't want you to like lean too hard into that. But as Mars goes opposite Uranus is liberation, freedom, instability, but it's in Gemini. And Gemini is about what we know, and Sagittarius is about the unknown. Like think of Gemini as something I was thinking about was in the movie, I think it's Year One, where it's like Jack Black and Michael Cera, and they're like, in a little tribe, and they go out of the tribe and they find Abel and Cain and all that kind of stuff. It's a really funny movie if you haven't seen it. Gemini is like what you know, is the village within like that you operate in, and Sagittarius is beyond the horizon. And so as Mars goes into Sagittarius, there's this, I want to go over here. I want to run away. I want to escape. I want to go the distance. But as you do that, it's going to disrupt what you know. When you live inside, it's one of those things where if you haven't moved out of your hometown when you were like 18 to 21 years old, it can be really easy to like only be influenced by what you know, versus when you go somewhere else, you move to a different state or you move to a different city, you start really exploring things that you've never explored before, and it changes what you thought you knew. And that's the Gemini Sagittarius axis. Mars is going to be problems, but also energy and drive related to the unknown and what we're going towards. And Gemini is about what we know, and Uranus being there is like, there's some freedom there, there's some instability there, but there's this point of like being creative with it. And so what I like about Tuesdays, there's something that happens where you decide to go the distance, you decide to take the energy, you decide to just blast off, that it really shakes your world up. And I want to emphasize Mars is in Sagittarius, and the ruler of Sagittarius, Jupiter, is in Cancer. It is exalted at the moment. So it is doing really well. So there's something really powerful about trusting the process here and understanding that there is more for you. It's just going to come at a cost of stability. That's a big theme this week, is the cost of freedom is stability. So there's a big shakeup, and a lot of the energy on Tuesdays, just fuck it and do it. And then later on, the moon is going to ingress into Taurus and make a square to Pluto. What's really interesting about this is the moon being in Taurus is usually like really grounded and stable, but the rest of the energy of the day is very chaotic. So there's going to be a tendency for you to want to feel a little bit comfortable and want to, feel yourself, have some sort of sense of security. And I don't know if that's really available for you on Tuesday. You might reach for things that make you feel a little bit more secure and safe. But with kind of all the chaos going on, you might just have to be able to deal with it and find, some sort of security or safety or stability in a brief moment of time, alone in your car before you go to work or before you go back into your house. And the moon does square Pluto. So there's this like grounded energy, but it's a little bit tense. But Tuesday is really exciting, in my opinion. I think with a lot of astrology, a lot of people say I'm negative, and I really think the opposite. I think a lot of you guys really interpret what I say in a negative way because you're looking for the negative. The astrology is always changing, and the weather is always changing, and you can't be upset when things, change in a way that you didn't expect, but you can be excited about it. You can be grateful for it. I teach a lot about contrasts in astrology, and you can't really enjoy the good without any of the bad. But this is a little bit more about like, you can't enjoy the peace and stability if you don't know what instability and taking chances looks like. So I think Tuesday's a really good opportunity to just take a big chance. We get to Wednesday. We have the full moon in Taurus on Wednesday morning. And then later on in the day, the moon is going to be making a sextile to Jupiter and Saturn. And it's Parker's birthday. If you guys know Parker, my video editor, she has been working with me for a long time now. It's her birthday on the 5th. Everyone say happy birthday, Parker. You could put in your own emoji, but I've got 2 emoji options for you guys once we get to the end of the video. But I think she's turning 28. Yeah, 28. So say happy birthday to her. But let's talk about this full moon in Taurus. So what's funny to me about this is the full moon is about illuminating the dark and illuminating the light. And this is in Taurus, which is about peace, security, stability, value. And the ruler of Taurus, which is Venus, she's in Libra right now. She's in her domicile sign. And I've been thinking about this in a lot of different ways, because this to me seems like one brief moment of being able to look at everything that you have in your life and acknowledge what you have that is nice. Not that it all goes away, but the next little while, and its themes are really about like not enjoying things. So there's something about Wednesday that's just like, you know what? I'm enjoying what I have. Venus, both benefics are dignified right now. Venus is in Libra, Jupiter is in Cancer. Things are good. And the Scorpio Taurus axis is also, hey, Taurus is like, hey, you want a beautiful garden, right? You want flowers, you want all this stuff. In order to do that, you have to get your hands dirty. And I look at this full moon in Taurus as like, are you willing to get your hands dirty and do the dirty work in order to benefit from the rewards of that work? So there's a lot about realizing the good that you have, especially in relationships. There's a lot of relationship stuff coming up over the next, 2 weeks anyway, which is kind of funny for me releasing the relationship course too. But full moon in Taurus, Venus in Libra, enjoy what you have. Enjoy the people that are around you. Acknowledge it and understand that in order to keep that and retain that, there might be some dirty work that you have to deal with for coming up. Then later on the day, the moon will make a sextile to Jupiter and Saturn. And it's funny that the full moon happens and the moon kind of does this sextile to Jupiter and Saturn where there's a level of like, hey, you know what? I feel grounded. I feel safe. I feel in this peace. And I've talked a lot about Saturn and Pisces and Jupiter and Cancer right now being like a lot of emotional depth and a lot of emotional healing stuff. And so I think there's a level on Wednesday to feel a little bit calm and at peace and stable that can allow you a little bit more room for, emotional healing is a really benign word. I would really look at it as Jupiter and Cancer is you have faith and there is abundance in being able to like nurture and protect yourself. And Saturn and Pisces is understanding where maybe you've been a little bit cold and cut off and reserved from being open to those things. And I think this full moon allows an opportunity to just chill and feel good for just a minute. And it is a full moon. This is when the crazies come out. So expect there to be a lot of heightened emotion. But what you want to lean into is being like, you know what is going to make me feel grounded right now? We get to Thursday. The moon will make a sextile to Neptune and Pisces before it then moves into Gemini. The moon will then conjoin Uranus. It will go opposite Mars while it's in Gemini. Venus moves into Scorpio on Thursday, and then the moon goes opposite Mercury. A lot of shit happens on Thursday. And it's so funny to me that the full moon in Taurus happens, right, which is ruled by Venus in Libra, and then Venus immediately goes into Scorpio. So there's like this really black and white difference between Wednesday and Thursday. But as the moon, is in Taurus and it makes that sextile to Neptune, there's a little bit of like a nostalgic mourning that happens. But then the moon moves into Gemini and it conjoins Uranus. It goes opposite Mars. There is going to be some sort of information or some sort of idea that you have or some sort of conversation that you have that really kind of throws things up in the air. I don't know about you guys, but Uranus and Gemini for me has been like, I have this idea. I'm going to do this. I have this idea. I'm going to do this. It's just been very like chaotic. And that's why okay, let me just get ahead with the emojis. If you made it this far, comment one of two of the emojis. I was looking through the emojis this week and I was debating between there's like just a regular wooden chair. And I think there's something really funny about the regular wooden chair, or there's a clown juggling emoji. And I feel like that one's really good because there's just so much different energy this week. And go ahead and comment the clown juggling emoji if you've made it this far. But as the moon goes into Gemini, there's a little bit more of curious and open energy. But as it conjoins Uranus and goes opposite Mars, you might be exploring ideas and you might have this like sudden insight. But just like I said earlier about the Sagittarius and Gemini axis, there's a level of like, oh, I have this idea. What does that mean? I want to do this. How do I get there? There's now going to be a tension between what you know and what you don't know, which is really similar to like the whole Pisces Virgo thing. But Gemini is like, what's in your immediate awareness? What are you aware of? What information do you have versus what is literally the unknown that you can travel to? And I think the moon in Gemini opposite Mars is really like, I have this idea, but I'm not really sure how do I get there? What am I doing to get there? And there's a level of, it's funny. I look at this as like, you might have to prioritize a little bit on Thursday, which might be actually a little bit difficult. But if you don't prioritize, you're going to start feeling overwhelmed. I think with a lot of the fire and air stuff, it's easy to feel gassed up and ready to go, but also over caffeinated, maybe like I am right now. And you might feel really overwhelmed. So try to do your best to just prioritize and not get too ahead of yourself because that dynamic will be really loud on Thursday. And then Venus goes into Scorpio. And like, look, Venus is about pleasure and fun and connection. But in Scorpio's about dark, deep, hidden things, transmutation, old school modern 90s astrology is like the Phoenix rising. I don't really think it's that. I look at Venus and Scorpio as if Venus is about fun and Scorpio is about like painful things, pain and pleasure are our two motivating factors in life, right? We either do things because they pleasure us or we do things because otherwise we'll feel pain. And Venus is in the sign of pain. There's a level of like enjoying pain, enjoying the hard parts. When you look at Venus and Scorpio in people's birth charts, I've said this before and I say it all the time. When I get clients who have Venus and Scorpio, I always feel somewhat bad because when you first get into astrology, you look up Venus and Scorpio, it's like whore, slut, and BDSM. And there's a lot of truth to that because Venus finds pleasure in the sign of pain. But what you also see with a lot of Venus and Scorpio people is like long bouts of celibacy. And because there's this idea of like, well, if I can't have pleasure, then I'm going to go completely without it. Does that make sense? If it's not exactly what I want, I'm going to go completely without it. And when you see people with Venus and Scorpio too, they're like extremely attached to their, to their partners, to their relationships. It's like they have to be all in. And if you have Venus and Scorpio, like that's like a big key for your relationships is like, you can't date anyone that you're not completely invested into. Like, think of Scorpio as like a tar pit. Like, you got to be willing to get stuck in that and ride that out. But that's just like your nature, and that's what makes you great, right? It just might be counterintuitive to let yourself feel that way if you have Venus in Scorpio. But anyway, Venus goes into Scorpio. The thing I wrote down is enjoy what is not enjoyable. And so there is a level of like going without basic pleasure, going without some of the nicer things, and really focusing on like, I'm going to enjoy actually going through this process of not, having immediate gratification. Whether that's a dopamine detox, whether that's like cutting out the sweets or whatever, which might be hard because it's November and holiday season and everything like that. But if you're expecting to like be able to enjoy things in a normal way, Venus in Scorpio might make that a little bit more difficult. Venus in Scorpio is really like, if you want to enjoy things, go super deep, go super duper deep into the emotional muckiness of it. That's what Venus in Scorpio likes. And then later on in the day, as the moon is still in Gemini, it's going to go opposite Mercury in Sagittarius. And this is important because Mercury is about to station retrograde, but it's a lot of back and forth. And there might be this like wanting to change plans last second that may or may not be a good idea depending on your context and your situation. That brings us to Friday. We're only on Friday. Uranus retrogresses back into Taurus. We have Venus squaring Pluto, and then the moon in Gemini will make a square to Saturn later on in the evening. Look, Uranus coming back into Taurus, I like Uranus and Gemini better because Uranus is like, instability, changing your mind, innovation. And Gemini is like also about those things in a very weird way. Taurus, though, is about stability, value, consistency. And Uranus coming back into Taurus, expect like some big disruptions, especially whatever house Taurus rules in your birth chart. So like for me, it's going back into my 6th house of like health and work. And so there's some stuff that I'm already anticipating there. But what's interesting to me is Uranus comes back into Taurus while Venus, the ruler of Taurus, is in Scorpio. So this seems to be like double upsetting. When I do astrology, especially with like clients, I usually like to build up a case for something. Like, it's not just, Venus is going through your 7th house, you're going to get in a relationship. It's like, well, on your lot of Eros L2, you enter a peak period. You're going in your progress full moon phase in your 7th house, and your 7th ruler is conjoining your 1st ruler in like the 11th. Like, yeah, you're probably going to go out with friends and like meet someone and start a relationship. Like, I build a solid case as to why I come to these delineations, and that's what makes me accurate most of the fucking time. And so when I look at Uranus coming back into Taurus and Venus going into Scorpio, is like, wow, there's like a double focus on pleasure and fun and even relationships feeling a little bit distraught. Is that the right word? Distraught. And so there's a little bit of back to the past and a shakeup. Now, look at what house Taurus rules for you. And that might be an area of your life that you want more stability and groundedness. And Uranus is just going to shake that up one last time. Don't be afraid to lean into it. That's the big thing. With Uranus and Taurus, I've been getting a lot of Thai massages lately. I can't even do regular massages anymore. I need a small Asian woman curb stomping my back. And why I've been doing is, number one, I have like bad posture and like a lot of tension in my back. But when you get stepped on, my body resists it. And I've been using it as a practice to like lean in and relax into things. When you are like, if you ever got a Thai massage and they're like stepping on your back, it's easy to tense up and you get hurt when you tense up in the middle of those things. It's the same reason why in drunk driving accidents, the drunk driver usually is fine because their body is relaxed. And so when they're relaxed and a car crash happens, they're not as injured. And so, when I get these massages and she's like stepping on my back, I'm like mindfully like relaxing into it. And that's when like my back cracks. And it's like, that's when I get the feeling that I want to have. And it's been really helpful in terms of looking at other areas of my life where I've been, what am I tense about? What is happening that is uncomfortable and tense? And how can I better relax into it so I don't make it worse? And that's been really, really helpful. And something I like doing is having like physical proxies for like spiritual work. And that's why, don't get me wrong. I just need to relax a lot more. So that's why I've been going there. But having like an actual physical thing that I have to like relax into has been really helpful for me in just relaxing. So I'm speaking about all that because as Uranus goes into Taurus while Venus is in Scorpio, there might be this like having to tense up. And I just want you to relax into it. Like with all of the Scorpio, Cancer, Pisces, all the water stuff going on, there's a lot of safety right now. Something I've been talking about is November is a really deep emotional month. It is like a very intense traumatic therapy session where we kind of release all of that stuff. This is a safe space this month. So I don't want you to resist it. I want you to like allow yourself to be in that space. Now, Venus does make a square to Pluto on Friday. And the one thing, as I would say, is don't seek revenge. And the other part of it is power dynamics. You know, Venus in detriment squaring Pluto is like, this is a bad thing. And you know what? I'm going to do it because it is bad and stuff like that. And depending on what you're into, that might be fine. But I think another level of it, though, is it's going to be really easy to lean into things that you know may not be good for you. Now, the other part of it, though, is Venus in Scorpio squaring Pluto might be like, I'm so uncomfortable that I'm now like spiraling. I'm so uncomfortable and I'm going with, I'm going without pleasure so much that now I'm freaking out about it. And so the thing that I like about astrology is these moments pass. So like, don't feed into it that much. This might be an uncomfortable moment. And the way that you really deal with like Venus and Pluto stuff is like, you kind of have to enjoy it. You kind of have to enjoy going to the extremes. And so it's just for a day, but Friday just seems really, it's just, yes, it's Uranus going back into Taurus and it's Venus squared Pluto, but I find this to be maybe a little bit more than you bargained for, especially by the end of the evening on Friday while the moon's in Gemini squaring Saturn. There might be this overwhelming feeling of emotions and thoughts, and you might have to learn when to shut up and when to kind of calm it down. The thing I usually write down for the moon in Gemini squaring Saturn and Pisces is like, stop oversharing. You've overshared and now you have a little bit of regret. So if your mind is spiraling, just like you got to know when to give it a break for just a minute. That brings us to Saturday. And on Saturday, the moon's going to go into Cancer and it's going to make a trine to Venus in Scorpio. Look, I love this kind of stuff because the moon in Cancer is a lot about like self-care. And I actually mean like self-care, like protecting yourself, healing yourself, nurturing yourself. Again, like whether that's cleaning your house, just taking care of some certain things, maybe going to the park, reading a book, whatever you guys do. The moon in Cancer making that square, that trine to Venus in Scorpio is, hey, maybe this isn't about, hedonistic pleasure or having all of this fun. Maybe in order to have a little bit more fun or to enjoy things, you need to focus a little bit more on what's going to make your body feel good. Because if your body can feel good, your mind can feel good. If your body feels like shit, your mind is going to be like shit. And so the thing I wrote down was self-care and do what is needed, not what is wanted. That's a really important dynamic to look for on Saturday. And that brings us to Sunday. Moon's going to be in Cancer. It's going to make a trine to the sun in Scorpio. We have our last highlight, and that's Mercury stations retrograde. And then the moon later on in the day will conjoin Jupiter and trine the sun, trine Saturn. So two different vibes on Sunday. One is the moon trining the sun and conjoining Jupiter and trining Saturn. So there's like this emotional depth and kind of like looking at the big picture. And then there's Mercury stationing retrograde. I've been thinking a lot about this Mercury retrograde in terms of what I learned last year. Last year, Mercury stationed retrograde in Sagittarius, and it was opposite Jupiter in Gemini, and it was just kind of like, Mercury stationing retrograde in Sag this year on top of Mars. And I just put out a video about this, is going to be frustrating. There is going to be some conflicts. One of the things I wrote down was like, you need to just go. What I mean by that is Mercury, and I was thinking about this because I have next week's weekly horoscope written already. And next week, like the moon is going to be in Virgo and square Mercury. You kind of have to go whether you're prepared or not. And I think Mercury, which is about like logistics and planning, it's in detriment and it's going to go retrograde where it's like, oh, I don't have this, oh, I don't have that. Well, the train's already moving. Things are already taking off. Something that I think is really funny is if you ever packed for a trip, there's people I know in my life that, they overpack and they don't need to. Versus for me, it's like I underpack most of the time. And it's like, well, if I need anything, it'll be at the destination I go to. Not every city has everything that I could ever need at, within walking distance of an airport pretty much. And so I look at Mercury stationing retrograde on Mars is, what are you moving forward towards? What do you want to take action on? And you need to stop thinking and start believing. You need to stop thinking about whether you have the right things, whether you don't have the right things, whether you need to plan more or be more rational about it. You need to turn your brain off. You need to literally just trust. That's going to be hard. As you trust, as you keep moving forward, as you're just taking one step at a time and putting one foot in front of the other, you're going to question yourself. You're going to get confused. You're going to get frustrated. That's a part of the process. And so I look at Mercury stationing retrograde is there's a change of plans and your ideas aren't going to work. You can only ride on faith. And I really look at this as like, you later on in November when Mercury comes back into Scorpio, we kind of get to revisit all this dark emotional shit. And it really comes from, I think, here giving us a different perspective of what we believe and what we think. You know, while Mercury is in Scorpio, trining Jupiter and Saturn, it's like, yeah, I'm really getting invested in this deep stuff and I need to fix it and heal it. I think in order to do that, you kind of have to suspend like rationality. You kind of have to let yourself change your mind about things. And I think this Mercury retrograde will be challenging, but it's really good. You know, in the video I talk about this is, I think, the best and the worst Mercury retrograde, which is a funny dynamic. Next week, Jupiter stations retrograde, where you're going to have to create your own luck. And Mercury will conjoin Mars next week as some of our highlights. I think Saturn trines, the Sun trines Jupiter and Saturn next week too, I think. But with that being said, like I said, the relationship course, everything that I've learned, if you guys want to know when you're going to meet your relationship, if you're ever going to get one, which you fucking can, like we're going to talk all about that. If you want to understand more about your own femininity and more about masculinity, this is both for guys and girls, related to your chart, related to astrology, and being able to use astrology to enhance not only your current relationship, but any other future relationships. This course is going all deep into that. Again, it's a 4-week live course where during the live sessions, you're going to be able to ask me questions. We'll be able to go over everything. Like I said, we're going to go deep into things like synastry charts and composite charts. And I'm going to be able to show you not only how to read them, but how to actually understand them and use them to benefit your relationship rather than just like question whether or not this person is the right person or not. Like I said, the link to that is in the description, and it is pinned as the pinned comment. This is something I'm really excited for. I've been working on this for a long time, and I'm excited to share it for you guys. But like I said, next week is when the opportunity to join ends. We'll be starting it on November 16th. For 4 weeks. You can get more information at the link. And with that being said, I'll see you guys then.